Hey, everybody, and welcome to the session on sociology for the Discover Seattle Colleges series. This is me, Geoff Palmer, and I have a little bit of stuff prepared for you today, and I'm hoping to hear some questions and comments from you in a little bit. But before we get going, I like to do a little bit of introduction for myself here. And so just in case you can't see me, here's a picture of me on the PowerPoint slide taken at our North Seattle College campus next to the roadies, looking so good. And I'm a Seattle native, which I guess actually makes me somewhat rare because data from just a few years ago shows that fewer than 30% of adults living in Seattle were actually born in Washington state. So yeah, I'm kind of a rare breed here. I'm an adult that was born in the Seattle area, actually, even more narrow than Washington state. And a few other things about me that you might be interested to know. I know what it's like to be a North Seattle College student because I too was a North Seattle College student. I got my associate's degree from North before transferring over to the University of Washington Seattle campus, where I got a bachelor's and a master's, and then eventually over time, I bounced around between colleges, but eventually I got a chance to come back to North Seattle College to be the sociology professor, and I'm super stoked about that. I can't tell you how lucky I feel every day. I'm also a hockey fan, and I was a hockey fan before Seattle had its own professional team. And so my allegiance, sorry to say it, everybody, my allegiance is to the Vancouver Canucks, unless they're not playing the Seattle Kraken. If it's the Seattle Kraken playing anybody else, I'm for the Kraken. But as soon as it's, orcas versus giant octopuses, I'm going to go for those orcas. I also want to tell you a little bit about what brings me joy. It's always fun to talk about joy, I think, right? And so two things here for you. You can see pictured on this slide an image of my favorite creature. This is Pavel Bure Wonder Pup. He's a Chiweenie, so he's about, this long and about that tall. And when he walks around, his belly scrapes the floor, so he cleans up after himself, which is pretty cool. Just a 17-pound bundle of justice right there. Love that little guy. And then you can also see a picture of hash browns down below. Hash browns are just potatoes that are prepared perfectly. And then, you add some butter, some salt and pepper, and they're delicious. And they get butter from the plate to my mouth. And so they're intrinsically, objectively good. But I also want to tell you a little bit about my experience as a fast food veteran, because before I came to college at North Seattle, I worked at Dick's for maybe 5 years. And back when I was working at Dick's in the late 90s, I was hanging out. Here's a little story for you. I was the manager at the time. So, I had the white shirt on, paper hat, clip-on tie, really cool stuff. And I was sitting in the back kind of flipping burgers over there on Broadway, flipping burgers, working hard, hustling. And one of my employees came up to me, this big dude, probably about 6'3". His name was Rasan. And he said, "Hey, Geoff." And I looked over at Rasan. And what I saw kind of surprised me because big guy, pretty masculine, kind of big dude, had this tear rolling down his face. And when I saw this tear rolling down Ra's face, I said to myself, "Hey, what's going on with Ra?" And I started to try to explain what I was seeing. I started to develop a rationale or a vocabulary of motive to explain why this tear was trickling down Ra's cheek. And so first I went to interpersonal stuff. I said, maybe Ra just broke up with Ra's partner. Maybe Ra's experienced the emotional pain of losing a significant other. Maybe Ra just learned some other kind of bad news about college, about something else. Maybe Ra's car just got broken into. I'm not sure. But those are the first answers that came to my mind. And so as I turned to Ra and I saw this tear trickling down his cheek, I asked, "Ra, what's up? What's going on? I mean, why are you crying?" And Ra looked at me and he looked outside, and I followed Ra's gaze. I looked outside, and what I saw outside kind of surprised me because I'm not sure if you remember this from the 90s, but when I looked outside, what I saw was this crowd of people moving through the street on Broadway. And I saw this crowd of people moving, and following those crowds of people were police officers that were using things like tear gas. And so the reason why Ra was crying wasn't because they broke up with their partner, it wasn't because their car got broken into. The reason why Ra was crying is because we got tear gassed, right? And so when I'm thinking about this event of getting tear gassed, this is a really sociologically interesting phenomenon. And in sociology, what we often do is we consider both the individual aspect of things. Is there something about the individual, maybe a choice that they made that led them to experience this event that they're experiencing, this tear gas? On the other hand, maybe there are some social forces at play that are bigger than the individual, that the individual actually doesn't have very much control over. And yet those social forces are so powerful that they impact our lives in ways that we can't avoid. And it turns out in 1999, when I was getting tear gassed at the Broadway Dick's Drive-In, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know about the WTO or the World Trade Organization. I didn't know about the protests that were happening in the street that had been planned for quite some time. There were all of these social forces outside of me that I was unaware of. And so as a result, it would be impossible for me to explain why I was experiencing what I was experiencing as an individual. And that's really the promise of sociology, is that when we're thinking about why things happen, why our lives are the way that they are, or why the events that we see outside of ourselves are proceeding the way that they are, when we're asking these types of questions, sociology promises to give you a lot of interesting answers, because sociology is the systematic study of the connections between the individual and the social forces that envelop us. It's all about you and me together as individuals, but also recognizing that we're limited by our biology. I can only exist right here where I am right now. You can only exist where you are right now in this moment. And so our understanding of what it means to be human is limited by our biology. But if we start to use other tools, maybe science, which is one of my favorite tools, we can start to understand a lot of stuff. When we start to use science to investigate the relationship between individuals, you and me, and the social forces that surround us, we can start to get better answers to questions about so many different topics. We can learn about culture and crime. We can learn about socialization, the way that we become who we are. We learn about social structure, hierarchy, roles, and statuses, and how that influences the way that we behave and the way that other people treat us. We can learn about social networks, social ties, ways of analyzing those relationships. We can learn about deviance, norms, and rules, why people break them. We can learn about race and ethnicity, what they are, why they're changing all the time. We can learn about gender, those categories we use to describe a specific side of ourselves. We can learn about social class, aka money, and how this money influences the way our lives go. We can learn about immigration, education, occupation. We can learn about politics and environment. We can learn about so much using sociology. And so I bet you're starting to see why I love this stuff. And that being said, if we're thinking about sociology, it's not unusual, because there's so many different things they can do, that your faculty will specialize. And so just to share a little bit about me with you, I specialized in these 4 topics highlighted in my favorite color, orange. I specialized in the study of crime and deviance, race and ethnicity, and immigration and demography. So those are kind of my pet areas. If you have questions about these topics, reach out to me, let me know. It would make me really happy to hear from you. And I'll give you my contact information towards the end of our session today. But let's take a quick break and see how you do. I'm guessing some of the famous people that have taken sociology in their pasts. It turns out that sociology is actually kind of a popular major. I've had some pretty interesting experiences teaching people that went on to become Seattle Seahawks. I've taught people that are now working at the Pentagon. I know some really interesting folks. But let's see if you can guess the names of these famous people. And just type your answer into the chat. We'll see how you do, right? So can you guess the name of this famous person? The clue is this soccer player took Best Woman Player from FIFA in 2019 and called for an end to racism at the ESPYs. Married to a star WNBA player, she is known for crafty play on the field and activism off it. Can you guess who this famous person is? Give it a shot. Let me know what you think in the chat. Thinking about it. Thinking about it. That's a good guess, but not quite. All right, so nobody's gotten the answer correct yet, but I bet you that somebody would if I gave you a little bit more time, because this person's super famous, Megan Rapinoe. Megan Rapinoe, famous not only for the solid play on the field, but also for the activism off the field, right? Megan has a sociology background, but Megan's not the only one with the sociology background. Here's the next clue for you. This next clue says this Baptist minister and social activist led the civil rights movement in the United States from the mid-1950s until his death in 1968. Go ahead and type your answer into the chat if you think you got it. I'll let you know how you do. Oh, wow, you got this one really fast. Okay, so maybe the clue is super helpful. And so, yeah, nice job to that person who got this answer correct so quickly. This is in reference to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who many people know got a sociology degree in undergrad before transferring and getting a PhD in divinity. So MLK Jr., sociologist. Yes, maybe sociology influenced the way that MLK Jr. thought. I actually know that is a fact. Next question for you. How about this? Can you guess this famous person? We have 2 left. This person's a little bit different from the other two. This clue is this U.S. president won 489 electoral votes compared to his opponent's 49. That is definitely a landslide. Maybe this president was so popular because he double majored in sociology and economics. Can you guess who this famous president was? Type your answer into the chat if you think you got it. Oh, Woodrow Wilson, a good guess. Woodrow did have a PhD in political science, but not sociology. A good guess, Woodrow. Oh, Ulysses S. Grant. No. We can go a little bit closer to our current era. We're not thinking about the 1800s. We are definitely in the 1900s for this U.S. president. That's an extra hint for you. All right, I don't see the correct answer yet. Let me go ahead and supply it for you. Best answer here, we're thinking about, yes, the person picked, oh yeah, okay, finally the picture comes up. Ronald Reagan actually had a double major in sociology and economics, also a background in acting before becoming one of the presidents who had the largest percentage of electoral votes cast in their favor just back in the 1980s. This was 1980. You should see that electoral map. It's just almost all one color. What about the next person here? Can you guess the name of this famous person? This spouse of a U.S. president grew up on the south side of Chicago before earning a sociology degree as an undergrad, and then moved on to Harvard to get one of those law degrees. Do you know who this person is? Type your answer into the chat if you think you know. What do you got? Oh, not Melania, not Melania. Oh, yes, nice job. And so congratulations to the individual who pointed out Michelle Obama also has a background in sociology. In other words, there are a lot of famous folks that have backgrounds in my favorite discipline. And I know I'm biased, but these famous folks come from many different walks of life. I guess they're on the more liberal side, Ronald Reagan on the more conservative side. We have people who are very famous for their work in religious communities, like the Reverend Jesse Jackson. We have tons of politicians. I mean, look at Cory Booker and Maxine Waters, just for example. Also, lots of famous athletes took sociology courses in their college years, including people like Alonzo Mourning and Joe Teasman, and these are just a few. We also have Cal Penn, a very famous actor turned government policy guy, and maybe you will have a sociology degree in the future as well. And so when we're thinking about sociology degrees, they are super cool, and a lot of fun people have acquired them over the past maybe a couple of decades. But where can you study sociology if you develop an interest? Well, it turns out that sociology programs are available at all of the Seattle colleges. South Seattle also offers sociology courses, and they're also offered at many universities. Entry requirements are usually pretty minimal. It's not the same as a chemistry sequence or a math sequence where you really have to start building that knowledge early on and take things in order. Sociology is oftentimes begun just as an elective. People who say like, oh, what's that? They try the course out and then they fall in love because it is pretty cool stuff. So what can you learn, or do you learn stuff? Yeah, you definitely learn stuff. And so the way that things typically go for the academic student is that in undergrad, so this is freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, in those 4 years of undergrad, you typically learn about what other people have done before you. You learn about the famous research of Douglas Massey, or you learn about Adrian Raftery or Charlie Hirschman and all those things that they have done. Alexis Harris, wow. And so you're learning about what everybody else has done. You're learning about how they did it. You're demonstrating that you understand. Following that period of time in your academic trajectory, many people go on for advanced educations to seek master's degrees or PhDs. And at that level, what tends to happen is people start, at that level, people start pursuing their own research. So instead of learning what other people have taught you in the past, you start generating things that you will then teach to other people. So that is the typical trajectory. It's not the only one, but it's the one that many people follow. And do you learn stuff along the way? Well, yes, heck yes. Actually, you learn quite a bit of stuff. You learn topical content. So I already told you about many different topics you learn about. You also learn about the social science toolkit that sociologists use to investigate the world around them. Sociologists are really particular about making sure that what we observe is actually happening. And so we get kind of finicky about the way that we collect data, the way that we sample subjects from the population, and the way that we analyze that data. All that methodology stuff, super good. In fact, if you're chasing money, that methodology is what's going to get you that top earning paycheck, because that stuff's not always the easiest or the most fun for the average person. So you learn that stuff, you have a rare skill, and rare skills are highly compensated. In addition to topical content and methodology like statistics, etc., you'll also learn how to become a critical thinker, how to assess information that you are given or that you come across to figure out if it's actually good information. It turns out that the world is becoming more and more inundated, more and more filled with misinformation and disinformation. And so, in my personal view, sociology and the other disciplines that teach critical thinking are becoming more and more important every day as it becomes an imperative for us to be able to reject all the garbage. And it's not as easy as it sounds, right? And all of this stuff has implications for your life. It turns out that what you know is the information that you use to solve the problems that you come across in your life. And so the more you know, the more prepared you'll be. But to be honest with you, in addition to the topical content, the methodology, the critical thinking skills, all that stuff, I really hope that my students come away with the dual values of humility and curiosity. It turns out that scientific investigation will teach you that there's a lot of stuff that we don't know, even though we're studying ourselves. And so, at least in my view, the scientist, the learner, the person who really wants to understand the way the world works has to begin with humility. You have to admit that there's something that we don't know and fuel that humility with your curiosity to learn more. If you put those two values together, you're going to go to some amazing places. I can almost guarantee it, but I can't because, what can I use to guarantee stuff? But I think it increases your odds quite a bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward. Let's see if we can skip this one here, but I do want to tell you a little bit about the education pathway. So what types of university programs or further education relate to this major? Well, in general, when people major in sociology at the community college level, they intend to transfer onto a four-year university. And because I've been around for a while, my students have gone all over the place. Many people stay local and attend one of the UW campuses around the area, whether that be Seattle, Bothell, or Tacoma. Lots of good education happening at the UW and its satellite campuses. But I also have had students go all over the place. Western Washington University, Washington State University over there in Pullman, Central, Eastern, SPU, SU, Johns Hopkins, UCLA, UW-Madison, Boston College, the Ross School of Medicine in the Caribbean. Now, only one student went there, but still, I know somebody that went there. In other words, there's a lot of different places you can go with an education that you get at North Seattle College, with an education that you get in sociology. A lot of doors open for you if you work hard and learn more skills that you can use to learn about the social world around us. And as a result of the education that you receive, many people start thinking about jobs. This is hard to predict because many jobs require a bachelor's degree in general. And so you get people from many different majors. I know some tech companies in the area that really just require that bachelor's degree, and then they assume that means you're teachable. And so they'll pull you in even if you didn't major in computer science, right? But there are lots of jobs that sociology majors tend to fall into, and some of these jobs are here for you. Sociologist, it's one of my favorites. Market analyst, which is like applied sociology. A behavioral scientist, which kind of bridges together with psychology, and again, is like applied social science. We have teachers, you can work in K through 12, right? We have statisticians that don't focus specifically on sociological literature, but use some of those methodologies that we teach in the sociology department in order to assess things that are maybe different from the sociological focus. Maybe things like biology, for example. You can become a data scientist. One of my old students is working over there in DC as an analyst for a very famous place. You can become a criminologist, a probation officer, a social service manager, a public relations specialist. There are so many different jobs that you can get with a sociology degree. But if we're thinking about these jobs, people oftentimes will ask, well, where do graduates with this major typically work? And the answer for that is, I just don't know. Remember that humility value. When you don't know the answer to something, don't claim that you do. And it turns out that many of my students, I have no idea where they end up. It's only a small portion that contact me to let me know. And so I'm not really sure what the answer to this question is. But we can find information from other sources, and I would love to take you through this. Let me go ahead and make sure that I'm sharing the right screen here, because I know that the PowerPoint slide gets kind of cut off. But I want to show you some information from different websites that purport to tell you how much money you can earn as a sociologist. So let's begin by looking at this one here. This is the Work Development Council for King County, and I think pretty soon it should open up in a web page here for you. Whoa, you can see some of my Canvas tabs as well. And so if we're looking at this website, oh yes, we could browse for careers. Let us browse for sociologists, or maybe let's try, yeah, sociologists. Let's do that. Whoop, whoop. Okay, and so we're cruising here looking at the sociologist page from the Workforce Development Council. And what can we see? We can see that sociologists earn a median salary of $58,000. Oh, that's interesting. I'm not sure if that information is correct, though. So as a good sociologist, you'd always check more than one source, right? So let's try another one. Let's see if I go back to my slide here. Let's try ZipRecruiter. Let's see what ZipRecruiter says, right? And so ZipRecruiter, it looks like it has a little bit more information. But it seems to be in harmony with the other website here that listed the median salary at $58,000. Here we can see that the national average, according to ZipRecruiter, is also $58,000 a year. And then you can see it looks like the highest proportion of folks, 32% of jobs, are in this $30,000 to $40,000 category. Wow, I didn't know that. And then maybe 6% of jobs are down there earning less than 30. And then over here, it says the top out, sociology jobs top out at $130,000. I'm not so sure about this. And, I've looked at this data before, so I have a little bit of advanced knowledge. But maybe we can look at another source of data that might cast some doubt on what we're seeing here, right? In fact, maybe what we need to do is orient ourselves to the population that we're thinking about. Maybe the ZipRecruiter data is thinking about the national data, which would include states like, Alabama, Mississippi, North and South Dakota. Maybe these numbers would be a little bit misleading if we're trying to figure out how much money sociology folks make in the Washington area, specifically in the Seattle area, because that the Seattle area is kind of an expensive place to live. Expensive is what I meant to say. And that means that salaries tend to be higher here for folks. So let's take a look at yet one more source of data. And this third source of data I'm going to show you is actually governmental archival data. Because many sociology professors work for the state, you can actually look up their salaries using this special website called fiscal.wa.gov, right? So you can use this recording to find that URL and look up all kinds of information. The downside here is that the administrative records tend to be merged a little bit too slowly. For this guy, I'm impatient. I want things to happen really quickly. But as you can see, the most recent year that we have data for here in this data set is from the year 2020, right? And I'll pull up a couple of sociologists here for you, but I just wanted to point out, if you're looking for the state's highest paid employee, it's not the governor. We're looking at people who coach sports, right? So you can see in the year 2020, who's the highest paid state employee? It's Mr. Nicholas Rolovich, very famous in the news in the recent past for other reasons besides being a football coach. It was more about medical stuff. But in the year 2020, looks like he's pulling in about 3.2 million. Not too bad. If you want to make a lot of money, being a state football coach might be a good path. We can see if we keep on going down this list, the second highest paid employee was the UW's men's basketball coach. Third highest paid employee, the UW football coach. Fourth highest paid employee, the Washington State University basketball coach. So interesting. I'm not sure what this tells us about our values as a society, if we're paying these individuals more money than the governor of the state or more than some of the other folks that we have on staff. But at least it's data that we can trust pretty reliably. We know that it's accurate, right? This is straight from the source. Meanwhile, when we're looking at ZipRecruiter and the King County Workforce Development Council, it's not really clear where that information comes from. And it's not really clear if we're talking about the national area, just the county, King County, maybe Seattle, which is within King County. And it's not like everywhere in King County is Seattle, right? And so I really like the data that you can know for sure is actually accurate. And that's why we're looking at this fiscal.wa.gov site. And so we're trying to figure out the salaries of sociology folks. Why don't we take a look at some famous sociology folks? And who are some famous ones? Well, it turns out I know a couple of them just right off the bat. One person is over at the University of Washington. I used to take classes from Kate Stovall. Kate Stovall is currently the chair of the sociology department at the University of Washington. And it looks like in the year 2020, Kate pulled in a clean $220,000. Not too shabby, not too shabby. But what if we were thinking about people from other places? Well, I might look up Washington State University sociology department, and let's see if we can find some names of faculty here. Here's the people page. We're going to take a look at the people page. I'm going to search for the word chair, and I find Julie Kamek. And so let's look at Julie Kamek. If we add Kamek to this process, Kamek, How many Kamecs are there? Just one, being paid by the state of Washington. What we can see here is that Julie Kamek in the year 2020 received 3 different pay lines, right, for a total of, what is that, about 114.7. Again, not too shabby-labbily. What if we look at the faculty over there at, I don't know, Western Washington University, the sociology department, and let's see, let's look up those faculty there. All right, and if we're looking up these faculty over here, I'm going to look for the chair. Who is the chair? We're looking at Kristen Anderson. All right, and so let's go ahead and look up an Anderson. There are probably a lot of Andersons, right? So when I punch in the Anderson name, look at all those. So I'm going to go ahead and narrow this down a little bit by Kristen, and there's Kristen Anderson. There you are. And so let's go ahead and take Kate Scoble and Julie off of this list here. What we can see if we look at this data for Kristen Anderson is that there's probably a couple of different Kristen Andersons, right? One person is a professor, another person is an RN or a registered nurse. It looks like maybe there's a senior fellow, that might still be the professor. So there's at least 2 people here, right? And sociology will train you to digest data so you can quickly understand what's going on with all these rows and columns. But what we can see is for the professor in 2020, that professor earned a clean 110. Right. And so if we return to the previous data here from ZipRecruiter, remember they said that the sociology jobs topped out around 130. But we just saw that in the year 2020, that wasn't true, right? For Kate Stovall, that salary was much higher. So I'm not sure if I would trust what ZipRecruiter is trying to sell you. When you're thinking about questions like how much money do people make if they earn sociology degrees, one of the primary problems is finding the right data that speaks to that question. How are you going to assess whether that data is correct? Are there other sources of data that you can use? These are all elements of the critical thinking that a sociologist employs on a daily basis. And so I hope you enjoyed this example. I hope you enjoyed looking up people's salaries. I'm not going to show you mine, but you can look it up if you want. And let's go ahead and return to our lecture slides here. And let's see, I need to go back to sharing it this way. All right, and so if we're sharing our lecture slides, the next thing on our list here, and see if we're moving through the presentation, is an opportunity for you to ask some questions of me, and I'd be happy to answer them for you. And so I think I'll go ahead and stop this recording now so you don't have to feel the pressure of being recorded for other people to view. But thank you so much for coming to today's session. I really appreciate your participation in the chat, and my contact information is here for you if you'd like to get in touch with me, although I note that at the time of this recording, it is still COVID-19 protocol, so that phone number will just ring in an empty office. I'm sorry about that, but the email still works. So once again, thank you everybody for coming in today. This is Geoff Palmer, sociology faculty at NSC, signing off.